Part 1. Sonic Boom! I'm gonna skip a whole lot of video and just get to the meat and potatoes of his arguments.
As I explain how all the popular varieties of philosophical skepticism are refuted by different formulations of the same simple, easy-to-remember argument. This means that no matter which popular framework of skeptical epistemology the skeptic community identifies with, whether simple skepticism, or the academic skepticism of ancient Greece, or Enlightenment skepticism, or 20th century logical positivism, or the naive scientism of the so-called new so-called atheists, they will all be refuted by this same argument.
You gotta go fast. You gotta go faster there to get to this claim. And it's one huge claim. I can't wait to hear this argument. Don't think you have enough rings to survive the onslaught of critical analysis that I'm about to put forth on it. Sonic analogies are really difficult to make.
Skepticism, in the sense I am addressing here, is that category of views on epistemology which can be stated in the form nothing is true, or you can't know anything, or nothing is true except X, or you can't know anything except for X. The way you can tell a skeptical epistemology in this sense, apart from a non-skeptical epistemology, is that the non-skeptical ones aren't closed or exclusive about possible sources of knowledge. Non-skeptical epistemologies don't claim to make a complete account of all possible knowledge. They only claim to make an account of some knowledge. Instead of nothing is true except X, they'll say, these things are true, and leave alone the question of what else might also be true. This doesn't mean being open to contradictions. It only means being open to additional as yet unspecified sources or methods of knowledge. For a non-skeptical epistemology, we haven't defined limits of what we know. We've just said that we know some things. Non-skeptical epistemology is thus forwards compatible with new ways and means of knowing. But skeptical epistemology defines limits to exclude anything it doesn't cover from being counted as knowledge, so it is a closed system without this feature of forwards compatibility. In this context, skepticism is anti-progressive. Whenever you hear someone make a statement about what things can and can't be known, like nothing is true except X, or you can't know anything except for X, try to identify what they've put in for X. What is the exception?
What a sloppy mishandling you've produced of skepticism. I don't know where you're getting the idea that the only thing that we can know is true is X is in fact what skepticism is. Who said that? When? Where? Be nice to have some sources of this idea on screen or in the description, but you're too busy playing with your tail to find those and put those on this screen so we can actually have something to say, oh yeah, he's right. He gave resources for us to say that he's right. No, all we have to go on is you just saying that this is the way it is. Because this is, after all, it's a professionally done lecture, right? Well, no, you didn't claim it was professionally done, but you're presenting it as a lecture and you're playing a video game. Come on! Okay. Doesn't matter if he's playing a video game. Doesn't matter. He might have his argument. He doesn't have an argument, but he might have an argument. If only he had given us somewhere to look to say whether or not this statement is something that skepticism is built upon. I guess he just wants us to do that work for him and to look up whether or not this is something that skepticism has said. You can not know the truth except for that you can know that you cannot know the truth. Oh, it sounds interesting. Who said that? And when? The only thing that you can know for sure is that you cannot know anything. Okay, who said that? When? Now that last one's closer to skepticism than the first one, but still without any statements of who said that, when, and where, who cares? There are plenty of sources for skepticism online. A lot of people have a lot of ideas of what it is and isn't. There's essays, there's even Wikipedia entries, there's all sorts of things that you could go to say, here is an example of what skepticism is. But none of that is done. So there's no argument being given for us to think that that's what it really is. Now, I said that it's closer to say that with skepticism, the true statement would be close to saying we can't know anything for certain except for the fact that we can't know anything for certain. That would be the closest sort of statement that would be exclusionary that you could make that aligns with most of the pages that talk about skepticism. But even that is not a hard and fast rule. Skepticism is doubting. And it's also a little bit more than just doubting, but it's critical analysis and critical questions. It's a critical inquiry of things, of ideas, of statements, of questions, of data and facts and anything that's put forth. It's not just believing willy-nilly what is set before you. So see, in the beginning, when he said that, well, it's good to be skeptical about things, but philosophical skepticism is this other thing. No, you're wrong. Philosophical skepticism is just admitting to hard solipsism, essentially. That our senses can be flawed. And so we have to acknowledge that, and be aware of that, and come up with a system that removes the human bias, which is what you've already discounted as scientism. And every time and any time somebody complains about scientism, there is typically the assumption that somebody is saying the only way to know things is through science, and well, you can't know that that statement's true scientifically, so it's flawed. No. The way that we can know more about things is through science. And a lesser version of science might be philosophy. And it does no good to say, well, but philosophy of science, that's great. Well, because that's the system of it. We can't explore something adequately enough with just logic or just philosophy. We need to remove the human bias. And the only system that we have available that we know works is science. And that's not saying that the only way we know is through science, because we already included that we used logic and that we used philosophy to some extent. But there was a hard barrier that we ran up against, a wall, where we said, okay, now we're going to have to apply a more rigorous system to this because we want to remove the human bias that we acknowledge exists. If we don't acknowledge that, then we leave ourselves vulnerable to just believing anything that anyone presents as being true.